Well, throughout this Lenten season, we've been following the Miracle Maker, and we're going to come to the end of this series here this morning. But I just want to take a moment to say, if you are considering at all going over to the cantata at 11 o'clock, I could not encourage you more strongly to do so. It really is a moving cantata this year that will help you reflect upon Holy Week and the passion and the suffering of Jesus Christ. The bells are playing and the cantata makes it for a very special morning this morning at 11 o'clock. But we've been following the Miracle Maker through Galilee and Jerusalem, and we've seen some miracles. We've seen some wondrous things. Water turned into wine. We saw a paralytic man get up and walk. We saw a small boy's lunch feed literally thousands of people with enough left over to provide provisions for the disciples as they traveled. We saw the Miracle Maker tread on water to come to his frightened disciples in the dead of night. And last week we saw a man born blind receive his eyesight. And as we've seen these things, we realize each miracle has been a clue, pointing us toward a new creation, pointing us toward the redemption of the world. A kingdom some call it, God's kingdom on earth as it is in heaven, where there is no more physical brokenness, where there is nothing more to fear. Remember, where there is no more want or hunger or thirst, where people see and understand that this Miracle Maker is the one who has come to initiate this kingdom and provide signs of it, and a promise that this kingdom will come to fruition. A kingdom where all will have much to joyfully celebrate. The way you might celebrate at a wedding feast. A wedding feast where the wine never runs out. That's where we began, remember? At a wedding. And we finish here today at a funeral. A good friend of Jesus and the disciples has died. His name was Lazarus. The Miracle Maker arrives in the 17th verse of the 11th chapter of John. Let's listen.
When Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days.
Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, some 2 miles away, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them about their brother.
When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him, while Mary stayed home. Martha said to Jesus,
"Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that God will give you whatever you ask of him."
Jesus said to her,
"Your brother will rise again."
Martha said to him,
"I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day."
Jesus said to her,
"I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this?"
She said to him,
"Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one coming into the world."
When she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary and told her privately,
"The teacher is here and is calling for you."
The Jews who were with her in the house, consoling her, saw Mary get up quickly and go out. They followed her because they thought she was going to the tomb to weep there.
When Mary came where Jesus was and saw him, she knelt at his feet and said to him,
"Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died."
When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her also weeping, he was greatly disturbed in spirit and deeply moved. He said,
"Where have you laid him?"
They said to him,
"Lord, come and see."
Jesus began to weep. The Jews said,
"See how he loved him."
but some of them said,
Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?
Then Jesus, again greatly disturbed, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone was lying against it. Jesus said,
"Take away the stone."
Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him,
Lord, already there is a stench, because he has been dead 4 days.
Jesus said to her,
Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?
So they took away the stone, and Jesus looked upward and said,
Father, I thank you for having heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I have said this for the sake of the crowd standing here, so that they may believe that you sent me.
When he had said this, he cried out with a loud voice,
Lazarus, come out!
The dead man came out, his hands and feet bound with strips of cloth, and his face wrapped in a cloth. Jesus said to them,
Unbind him and let him go.
Many of the Jews, therefore, who had come with Mary and had seen what Jesus did, believed in him.
But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what he had done.
So the chief priests and the Pharisees called a meeting of the council and said,
What are we to do?
This man is performing many signs.
If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him.
And the Romans will come and destroy both our holy place and our nation.
But one of them, Caiaphas, who was high priest that year, said to them,
You know nothing at all. You do not understand that it's better for you to have one man die for the people than to have the whole nation destroyed.
It is better to have one man die than to have the whole nation destroyed. Thank you. As Jesus arrives in Bethany, he learns that Lazarus is already dead. In fact, he has been dead and buried for 4 days. Had Jesus not delayed his visit, Jesus might have had the opportunity to see his friend before he died. Perhaps the miracle maker that he is, he might have been able to heal Lazarus the same way that he had healed others. That's why Mary and Martha are so angry and heartbroken. Why hadn't Jesus come earlier when they first sent word to him? But his delay means not only that Lazarus has died, but means that the power and the authority of God's work can now be revealed in an even more dramatic and powerful fashion. John says that Jesus sheds tears at the tomb. And we're not sure. We're not sure whether those tears are for Lazarus, what he had to endure for his own suffering and death, or is Jesus weeping because of the grief, the heartbreak of his good friends, Mary and Martha, their loss? That, in fact, might be it, as John tells us, that upon seeing their tears, witnessing their weeping, the tears of the sisters and the mourners that are gathered with them, it is then that Jesus, greatly disturbed in spirit and deeply moved, begins to weep with them. Hear it? See, oftentimes we talk about that little verse in the Bible as though Jesus is the one weeping there alone. He is weeping with those who are grieving, just as I believe he weeps with those who grieve today. Jesus asks to be taken to the tomb. And there he orders that the tomb is unsealed. And Martha immediately begins to protest. There will be an odor of dead and rotten flesh. After all, Lazarus has been in there dead 4 days. But there might be more to it than just that. Though she doesn't say it, any good Jew hearing this story would know that to come into contact with a dead body would render the people there unclean under the Jewish law. It would prevent them from entering back into the community of Bethany or prevent them from being in worship until they could undergo the ritual of cleansing, which would take many days. It's best to leave the dead alone, to leave the dead buried. But Jesus again reminds them that he's come that they might see the glory of God. And so reluctantly, they roll away the stone. And the miracle maker looks to heaven and prays to his Father, gives thanks, and then in a loud voice cries out, "Lazarus, come out!" How long do you suppose it took? After Jesus shouts those words of life into the deathly darkness of the tomb, how long? How long before they noticed, before they began to hear something stirring deep down in the bowels of the tomb? How long before they heard something? What was it? Something like the muffled shuffling of feet, as though they're wrapped and bound in cloth. How long before their brains began to process exactly what it was that was happening right in front of their very eyes? How long? Until Lazarus, something like a monster from an old black and white mummy movie, shuffles and stumbles out of the tomb and into the sunlight, and they realize that another miracle has taken place. That this miracle maker who has the power to manipulate the elements, this miracle maker who can walk on water and feed the hungry, this one who has the power to make the lame walk and even the blind see, this miracle maker has power even over death. He can raise the dead. How long do we wait by the graves of our loved ones? How long before we come to see this one who can raise the dead open the graves of those that we love? Unbind him and let him go, the miracle maker says. And Lazarus is free. Now, while there were some Jews there who witnessed this miracle and believed that Jesus is indeed the very one sent by God, the one for whom they've been waiting, the Messiah, there are others who can't wait and rush to tell the latest news to the Pharisees and the chief priests. And of course, just as they did when they heard about the healing of the blind man and the news of the paralytic who was healed before that, the chief priests and the Pharisees are none too happy when they hear the news of what Jesus has done now. It shouldn't surprise us. Jesus himself told us how blind the religious leaders are becoming, how they cannot see who he really is, what he really is doing, his works and the works of the one who sent him, the kingdom that he is building miracle by miracle right in front of their eyes. We shouldn't be surprised that they cannot see. The chief priests call a meeting of the council. Isn't that what happens whenever there's trouble? Somebody calls the council of the church together. We got to talk about this. What are we going to do with this Jesus who is performing so many signs, healing people, raising them from the dead, for crying out loud? If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, believe that he is the Messiah. You know then what will happen. The Roman soldiers, they will march in here. They will destroy the temple. Oh, it's happened before. They will destroy the city, and they will destroy what's left of our nation. Now, one of those priests, Caiaphas, who was the high chief priest that year, says something so profound. It has been remembered here word for word and written down by John. Caiaphas says to them, "You don't understand. You don't understand that it's better for you to have one man die for the people than to have our whole nation destroyed. And that one declarative statement, is the one that sets all the rest of the wheels into motion. Now the religious leaders know exactly what it is that they have to do. This miracle maker must be stopped. He must be executed. He's their sacrifice, after all. A sacrifice, if you will, for the people. The thing is, they still couldn't see, could they? How blind they have become. That this one man would become more than just a sacrifice for them. Why, he had become a sacrifice for everyone. He would become a sacrifice for the world. The whole wide, broken up, violent, sin-sick world. But they couldn't see that. You know what else they couldn't see? Those old priests and those Pharisees plotting murder. They couldn't see that Lazarus, stumbling out of the tomb, he's just the beginning. Because we know, don't we? We know next week Jesus himself will walk out of the tomb. But you know what? Even that resurrection, even the resurrection of Jesus is pointing to something else. Something far greater. There is something even more magnificent than the resurrection of Jesus. The old apostle Paul understood. And he tried to explain in his letter to the Corinthians, tried to explain that the resurrection of Jesus was just the start of something really big. Listen to these words from 1 Corinthians. In fact, Christ has been raised from the dead, the first fruits of those who have died. For since death came through a human being, the resurrection of the dead has also come to all of us through a human being. For as all die in Adam, so all will be made alive in Christ, but each in their own order. Christ, the first fruits, then at his return, those who belong to Christ, but then comes the end when he hands over the kingdom. When he hands over the kingdom, and he has destroyed every ruler and every authority and every power. For he then will reign until he has put all of his enemies under his feet. And the last enemy to be destroyed is death. Paul got it right. This isn't just about the miracle maker. This isn't just about his miracles. This is about the kingdom. And you know what that makes it about? This is about you and me. And death being destroyed. Utterly destroyed forever. This great miracle in the resurrection of Lazarus, it'll help us disciples see and help us to understand next Sunday when we find the tomb of Jesus is empty. But it helps us all know that this is kingdom work, all of it. And we should have known that. All of the miracles, they have been pointing us to the kingdom. The day not only when Christ is resurrected, but when all of the dead are raised. In fact, when the entire creation is resurrected and made new. That's the promise at the end. Remember, we've read it over and over and over through this series. The promise at the end, I see a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth have passed away. See, he says, I am making all things new. It will happen. It will happen. The miracle maker has been trying to show us all along. The kingdom is coming. The kingdom of life. The kingdom of God. Live for the kingdom. Amen. Let's stand and sing.